I didn't believe in spiritual retreats. I thought they were for people in existential crises or who had something to prove. But there I was, at 58, driving through the mountains of North Carolina toward a monastery my daughter insisted I visit. "Dad, you need to find peace," she had said, with that worried look that broke my heart since Linda left. "You're just existing, not living." She was right, of course. In the 3 years since the divorce, I had become a ghost of myself. I went to work at the architecture office, came home to the empty apartment, watched TV until I fell asleep on the couch. Weekends were worse, long, silent, full of regrets I didn't know how to process. St. Francis Monastery sat hidden among pines, a stone building that seemed to have grown out of the mountain itself. I arrived on a November afternoon, when sunlight filtered through the trees in golden beams that felt too divine to be merely physics. An elderly monk greeted me at the gate, his kind eyes studying my face in a way that made me feel exposed. "Welcome, son. I'm Brother Thomas. You're carrying a heavy load." It wasn't a question. I just picked up my backpack and followed him through silent stone corridors where our footsteps echoed like heartbeats. There were only 8 participants in the retreat. We were introduced over a simple dinner: vegetable soup, homemade bread, water. Everyone seemed burdened by their own stories, distant looks, polite but guarded smiles. And then she came in. I recognized her immediately, although 40 years had transformed the 18-year-old girl into a 57-year-old woman. Her blonde hair was shorter now, with white strands at her temples. There were lines around her eyes, but they were the same eyes, sea gray-green on an overcast day. Elizabeth Cooper, my first love. The girl who taught me what heartbreak was. She saw me at once, and I saw shock pass over her face. For a moment, I thought she would leave, turn around and disappear like she did that summer night in 1985. But she didn't. Instead, she breathed deeply and came to sit at the table 3 seats away from me. Dinner was torture. I could barely swallow, hyper-aware of her every movement, every low laugh at something Brother Thomas said. When our eyes met accidentally, she looked away quickly, but not before I saw something there. Pain, perhaps, or regret. After dinner, there was an hour of contemplative silence in the chapel. I sat on a wooden bench in the back, looking at the simple crucifix on the stone wall without really seeing it. My mind was in 1985, the last summer before college, when Elizabeth and I swore eternal love under the stars at Kitty Hawk Beach. 2 weeks later, she left to study music in Paris on a scholarship she'd kept secret. There was no proper farewell, just a note left with my mother. "Sorry, I need to do this for myself. Please don't hate me." I had hated her. For years, I kept that hatred as a shield against the pain. Even after I met Linda, even during our 23-year marriage, there was a small, cold flame of resentment that never fully went out. And maybe Linda sensed that. Maybe it was part of why she finally gave up on me. "May I sit here?" Her voice was deeper now, worn by time and cigarettes, I guessed. Or maybe just by life. I nodded to the space beside me, not trusting my own voice. Elizabeth sat, keeping a respectful distance, and we sat in silence for long minutes. The chapel was lit only by candles, creating dancing shadows on the stone walls. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said finally. Neither did I. My therapist suggested it, said I needed to learn to forgive myself before it was too late. She laughed softly, humorless. Funny, isn't it? 40 years later, and I'm still trying to deal with decisions I made when I was 18. I looked at her then, really looked. I saw the wrinkles around her mouth, the way her hands trembled slightly when she folded them in her lap. I saw a woman who had carried her own cross just like I had. "Did you have a successful career?" I asked, surprised at my genuine curiosity. "For a while. I played in orchestras around Europe, taught at the conservatory in Brussels. I married a French conductor, had a daughter." She paused. "Divorced 8 years ago. He had lovers. I had regrets. It wasn't a good fit. I divorced too. 3 years ago. Children? 2 daughters. Adults now, with their own lives, and you? 1 daughter. Sophie. She lives in Montreal. She's an English literature teacher. She's the only thing I did completely right. Elizabeth looked at the candles. She told me the other day that she grew up feeling like I was always looking backward, never fully present. She was right. Something tightened in my chest. My daughters say the same about me, that there was always a part of me absent. We returned to silence, but it was different now, less hostile, more reflective. Other retreat participants began entering the chapel, kneeling in prayer or simply sitting in contemplation. Brother Thomas lit more candles, turning the space ethereal and out of time. Why didn't you say goodbye properly? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Why just a note? Elizabeth closed her eyes and I saw a tear escape. Because I was a coward. Because I knew if I looked into your eyes I wouldn't be able to go. And I had to go, David. I needed it so badly it physically hurt. Why? My voice came out rougher than I intended. I would have waited. I would have visited. We would have found a way. No, we wouldn't have. She opened her eyes and stared at me. You would have given up Virginia Tech, the architecture scholarship, everything. You would have followed me to Paris and become resentful eventually. Or I would have refused the scholarship, stayed, and ruined my only chance to be more than the poor trailer park girl everyone expected to fail. Do you think I cared where you came from? No, but I cared. My father was an alcoholic, my mother worked 3 jobs, my siblings had already dropped out. That scholarship was my only way out, my only chance to be someone different, someone else. Her voice broke. But God, the price I paid, the price I made you pay. I looked at my hands, calloused from years of drawing and building things, creating structures meant to last. Yet I hadn't been able to build something durable with Linda. I hadn't built peace inside myself. I carried anger for so long, I admitted. When Linda left, she said she never had all my heart, said she always felt she was competing with a ghost. I breathed deeply, feeling tears burn in my eyes. She was right. I never let you go. I never really forgave. Elizabeth took my hand and the touch was like an electric shock. And now? Can you forgive now? I don't know. I don't know how. Maybe that's why we're here, she said gently. Not by accident. Maybe it's our chance to finally let go. In the days that followed, the retreat unfolded at a meditative pace. There were morning prayer sessions, silent work in the gardens, communal meals, and long stretches of solitary reflection. Elizabeth and I gravitated toward each other naturally, walking the mountain trails, sitting together in the chapel, sharing fragments of our lives in conversations that were both painful and necessary. She told me about nights in Paris when she played beautiful music but felt hollow inside, about a marriage that began with passion but ended in cold silences, about the depression that nearly took her and how she found her way back through therapy and eventually faith. I told her about building a successful career but a mediocre marriage, about making all the right moves on the surface while feeling lost inside, about how, after the divorce, I discovered I didn't know who I was without someone defining me. You know what I realized? Elizabeth said one afternoon as we sat on a large rock overlooking the valley. We both spent 40 years running. I was running from poverty, shame, the fear of not being enough. You were running from rejection, from pain, from the fear of being abandoned again. And where did that get us? Here, I answered. Alone, divorced, trying to figure out how to fix what's broken inside us. Not alone, she corrected gently. Here, together, after everything. On the 4th day, Brother Thomas led a session on forgiveness. He spoke about how forgiveness is not about forgetting or excusing, but about freeing oneself from the poison of resentment. About how holding on to grievance is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Forgiveness, he said, his soft voice echoing in the stone room, is a choice we make for ourselves. It is letting go of the weight we carry, not because the other person deserves it, but because we deserve peace. Elizabeth cried through the session. I held her hand and I cried too, perhaps for the first time since Linda left. That night, after the final prayer, Elizabeth asked me to walk with her. We went to a small outdoor chapel, a little more than a stone shelter with a bench and a simple cross. The night was cold. Our breath formed clouds in the air. "I need to ask your forgiveness," she began, her voice trembling. "Not because I think I deserve it, but because I need to say it aloud. I was young and scared and selfish. I broke your heart because I was so focused on saving myself. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't braver, more honest, kinder." Tears ran down her face, shining in the moonlight. I took her hands. "Beth." I used the nickname I hadn't said in decades. "You were 18. You were trying to survive, trying to build a life. I understand that now. I didn't then, but I understand now." I breathed in deeply, feeling something inside me shift, like a knot untying. "I forgive you. For everything. For the note. For leaving. For the pain. I let go." She sobbed, throwing herself into my arms, and I held her as she cried 40 years of guilt. And as I held her, I felt my own anger finally dissolve like ice under spring sun. "And I ask your forgiveness too," she said into my hair. "For holding resentment, for letting it poison my marriage, for never really trying to see your perspective, for making you the villain in my story when you were just a scared girl doing the best she could." "We both did the best we could," she said, stepping back to look at my face. "We were children, but we're not anymore. No. Now we're broken people trying to fix ourselves. Maybe we don't need fixing," I said, a strange clarity taking hold. "Maybe we just need to accept that we are broken, that the cracks are part of us now, and that's okay." We sat in that little chapel until late, talking about everything and nothing, about what our lives might have been if we'd chosen differently, about our children, our careers, our failed marriages, about faith, how we both had found it on our own crooked paths. "What will you do when you leave here?" she asked eventually. "I don't know. Live differently, I think. Stop merely existing. Maybe finally take that trip to Greece I always wanted. Maybe reconnect properly with my daughters." I looked at her. "And you?" "Go back to Sophie. Be more present. Maybe finally finish that composition I started years ago and never had the courage to complete." She smiled, small but real. "And maybe write to you now and then, if you want." I want. On the last day of the retreat, all participants gathered in the main chapel for a closing ceremony. Brother Thomas spoke of new beginnings, of how each day is a chance to choose differently, to live differently, to be different. "You came here carrying burdens," he said, looking at each of us. "Some you brought decades ago, others more recently. But all weigh the same. They weigh too much. Today, choose to leave them here. Not because the road ahead will be easy, but because you deserve to walk lighter." After the ceremony, Elizabeth and I lingered outside, delaying the inevitable goodbye. Morning sunlight filtered through the pines, casting patterns of light and shadow on the ground. "So," she said, that shy smile that reminded me of the 18-year-old girl. "Is this farewell?" "Not farewell. Never farewell." I hugged her long and hard. "This is, see you later. This is, thank you. This is, I forgive you and I forgive myself and we both deserve peace. This is, you will always be important to me," she whispered. "This is, I can finally let you go. And this is, I can finally let the guilt go." We parted and she touched my face gently, that gesture she used to make when we were young. "Be happy, David. Truly, deeply happy. Promise me you'll try. Only if you promise the same. I promise." I watched her drive down the mountain until her car disappeared among the trees. But this time I didn't feel emptiness, or anger, or loss. I felt peace. I felt gratitude for those days, for those hard conversations, for finally being able to honor what we had without letting it define who I am. I drove home with the windows down despite the November cold, feeling the mountain air clear the last traces of bitterness. My phone had messages from my daughters, and for the first time in years I actually wanted to respond, to really connect. That night I opened an old notebook and began to write. Not a letter to Elizabeth, but to myself. A list of things I wanted to do, places to see, conversations to have, forgivenesses to offer, both to myself and to others. At the top of the list I wrote, "Learn to carry the scars with grace. They are part of the story, but they are not the whole story." And then, for the first time in 3 years, I smiled at my reflection in the window and thought, I am ready. Ready to live again. Ready to be happy. Ready to let the past be just the past. Not forgotten, but finally at peace.